Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For the last episode of this month, my interview guest is the founder of the press release company eReleases, a poet, and the author of two nonfiction books, Beginner's Guide to Writing Powerful Press Releases and the PR Strategy Manifesto. His name is Mickie Kennedy, and my interview with Mickie will follow the teleportation sound. Mickie Kennedy, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
So my name is Mickie Kennedy. I run and operate press release distribution service by the name of eReleases, and I've been doing that for about going on 26 years. And I started in 1998, and I've been helping small businesses, entrepreneurs, startups, and others get media attention using press releases. I've also published a couple of nonfiction books about PR and press releases. And personally, I come from a poetry background, having gotten a degree in creative writing. I guess I finished up around 28 years ago at George Mason University in Northern Virginia.
Before I ask you about your nonfiction books, I'm going to ask you about eReleases, as that's going to help understand one of the two nonfiction books in particular, but probably both. But you founded eReleases, which, as you mentioned, is a platform for creating press releases. How does your platform work, and can authors use it for press releases for their books?
Yes, absolutely. Anybody can use it. We do have some parameters that we can't work with large companies or publicly traded companies just because we get a really huge discount from the wire. We utilize PR Newswire, which is the oldest and largest newswire of press releases. They themselves charge about $1,600 to go out nationally for a 600-word press release. And through us, all of our releases go out nationally through PR Newswire, and you'll probably spend about a third of what you would otherwise if you went to them directly. That being said, we work with all different types of authors. I do find fiction to be more difficult because so much of it depends on the writing style, and it's hard for a journalist to sort of see that in a press release. And a lot of them really don't want to commit to sampling a lot of fiction. And so I find that the authors that we're able to help the most are usually nonfiction authors who are writing about a subject matter that they're experts in, or a particular specialty that they feel is worth bringing to the attention of the market that exists through getting these books out there in the world.
You've written a pair of nonfiction books, Beginner's Guide to Writing Powerful Press Releases and the PR Strategy Manifesto. Without spoiling too much of each of your nonfiction books, what are they about?
So the first book, which is the Beginner's Guide, that is largely just about writing press releases, the format, the style. It goes into depth about each section of it. That being said, I kind of feel like it's a bit easier to sort of look at other press release samples that are out there and use those as guides. And we do have those on our website as well. Just look at press release templates or press release samples on eReleases. I think there's some links in the footer. The second book, which is about the strategy manifesto, that is really valuable information. It sort of talks about the most strategic types of press releases that are more likely to yield media pickup. And when I talk about that, it sort of comes from the fact that a lot of people say press releases don't work. And I would say it's true that like 97% of people who distribute press releases or send them over the wire don't get any earned media. And we call earned media what happens when a journalist writes about you, not your press release replicated on a bunch of websites, but they actually write an article based off the information in your press release. And press releases are just that. They're the building blocks for journalists to write an article. And we're not writing the article for them, but just giving them all the information, answering the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And hopefully the press release is important enough for them to cover. And that book really goes into the strategies of the releases that I see that are working. I looked at the 3% of releases that do get pick up, and I found patterns in there. There are releases that again and again work over and over. So I feel like if you're new to PR, or you're really looking to increase your visibility and pickup, I feel like one of the things that you can do is to look at this book, go through it, and try to ascertain what you could be doing that's more strategic. And things along those lines are, rather than have a product launch press release that just is, here's our new product and here's a list of features, incorporate the necessary material for the journalists to build a story. Journalists love the story arc. It's very natural to us. We grow up, having books read to us when we're children, and they sort of follow a story format. And if you look at any good article, even in your daily paper, even if it's only just a few paragraphs long, often they will try to take you through a story arc. And so many times, taking, for example, the product launch press release, there's not a story there. It's here's a product and here's features. And what could we do to make it more of a story arc is, let's go back and inject a use case study. Someone who tried your product or service, what was their obstacle at the beginning of it? What was their outcome, ideally with some data or numbers, and having a quote by them talking favorably about the product or service. And so that fulfills more of the information a journalist would need to build out a story arc, and it makes your press release so much more irresistible. And there are things like that in the book that go through the types of releases, the ways to write a release, things to include that make you more attractive to the media, and it also makes you more newsworthy. And that is really important when you're trying to distinguish yourself from so many other press releases that are out there.
Some of our listeners might not be too familiar about what a press release is, so I'm going to ask this question. What is a press release and how does it work?
It's basically just a third-party announcement, and by third party, it's written like, company is rather than we are. And you can talk in the first person in a quote, has a headline, may have a subhead. Usually there's a city and state that we call as part of the date line with the date of distribution. And then there's a few paragraphs. Could be as few as 3, could be considerably more. They're usually under 600 words. For a lot of people, a 400 or 500 word press release is sufficient. There may be a boilerplate at the end, and we call that when there's an about section, like if Microsoft was releasing one, at the end there'd be a paragraph. It'd say about Microsoft and then a paragraph, and that paragraph generally gets recycled and updated over time, and it just really is the elevator pitch of what your company is all about. And the rest of the press release before that sort of delves with what is important in being announced today. You are writing for the journalists, not the end users, so you don't want your headline to have puns or make it clever in a way that the journalists can't tell the information in that press release is relevant to them, their industry, their beat, and what they cover. And these releases go out over PR Newswire, and the journalists can log in. And they can stream the headlines of their industry, and they can actually even make it specific to their beat by including keywords to definitely include and keywords to exclude. So even though they may cover fashion, maybe they don't cover retail fashion. So they may want to put like a dozen company names that they never want to see those releases if they mention J.C. Penney or Target or things like that because they're covering high fashion. And so after they tailor it, that feed is very specific to them, and it becomes one of the most valuable things for them looking for stories. And in the United States, we have a duopoly of press release services. It's PR Newswire and Business Wire. And outside of that, journalists aren't really looking at any of these other places that are out there. There are some wires that you are probably familiar with, like AP, Associated Press, Reuters, UPI, United Press International, and some others. They do not transmit press releases. They may receive a press release and turn it into a story, but everything that runs over them is written by them for licensing and copyright purposes because they make their money by licensing their finished articles to newspapers and other media outlets. And so if you're the Baltimore Sun and you're getting ready to leave for the day at 5 p.m., and all of a sudden the Supreme Court has this breaking announcement, rather than ruining your plans that evening, you can log in later and pull the article down from the Associated Press, knowing it's a very high quality article, and include that. And you'll recognize these in your papers and other places because they usually say AP at the beginning for the Associated Press. And these places don't disseminate press releases, and so that's what distinguishes them from the press releases that do. There is a lot of other players out there in the market with Wire in their name. And they purport to distribute press releases, but if you look carefully, most of them do not acknowledge that they reach journalists. They do these syndication things where your press release will appear on a website, and they'll give you the how many people visit that website. But the truth is, it's usually a subdomain or a folder. And, people don't visit those sections of the website. And often if you go to those websites and do a search, your press release won't even show up. It's not part of their articles. It's like the paid articles that people pay for Forbes. It's never, those articles are never in the Forbes print publication, and they're on a section of the website that sort of is, I think used to be like, they would set it up for, influencers for blogging purposes, and now it's turned into a paid thing. So it is a distraction, the syndication, and the real importance happens when you distribute a release and a journalist organically writes about you, gives you that earned media. And when that gets picked up, it's like a huge credibility boost for you. When the New York Times writes an article about you, that is like almost an implied endorsement. It's definitely social proof that you are an important company or person. And it really builds a signal of trust to people. And you will find that, even when there's no link to you, people will do searches. They'll find you. They'll want to do business with you. They have this emotional response, this amplification. And that often when they go to your website, they're looking for a reason not to buy from you because they've already sort of bought in. And I myself am guilty of the same thing. When you read a great blog post or article about a Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and you follow their journey of how they just wanted this product and they couldn't get the people to make changes for the existing products out there to address their needs. And so they just decide to create it themselves. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there going, yeah, and I'm supporting this person. I don't really need this product or service, but I've bought into it. I'm excited. I have this rapport and excitement. And that's what happens with earned media. And it's so important. When you get earned media, the customers you get are often people who are not price shoppers. They are very loyal. And if you have a sales cycle that's, say, a little bit long, like 4 months, you might find that you convert them in 2 months or even less. And so, and you can take that same excitement and that same rapport and translate it to your existing leads and customers. Take that link to the article, share it with your leads. Take that link in the article, share it with your customers. The customers are important because you always have churn. There's always people after a while say, we probably should try someone else or, shop around just to make sure we're with the right company. But if they get that article, they read it, they feel like, wow, this is really exciting. And this person's been sort of spotlighted by this journalist. I'm comfortable working with them. No need to shop around this year. And so it's really powerful. It works in a way that no other type of marketing or advertising does. I've seen people with small consumer products that are very affordable just have like all of these visitors to the website, and they convert like sometimes as many as half of the visitors. And if you know anything about paid advertising, you would kill to have a landing page that converted half of the visitors. It just doesn't happen. And that can happen in the cases of earned media because it's such a powerful signal that people really respect it, and they really see it as, the fact that you are very credible and are very trustworthy.
Your first book, Beginner's Guide to Writing Powerful Press Releases, was published in 2014. In the era of the social media influencer, why are press releases still important?
So, yeah, the press release has been updated a couple of times and actually talks a little bit about Pinterest and Facebook and some of these other Twitter, now X. And so the press release is even more important today than before, largely because of the consolidation in the industry. There used to be three respectable, maybe even four respectable newswires. The two were very minor, but they were growing, and a lot of people saw them as a natural, low cost approach to reaching journalists. And unfortunately, what's happened over the last 2 decades is journalists have not been thriving, and their publications have not been thriving, and so they've been expected to do more for less, and therefore they just don't have the time to go to a third or fourth newswire. So those newswires combined and then pivoted away from reaching journalists and focusing more on meeting SEC disclosure requirements for publicly traded companies, and in fact have you said, hey, do you really want journalists looking very carefully at your press releases as a publicly traded company? Here, when someone does a search for you on Yahoo of your stock ticker, you show up, you meet the SEC requirements. So that's good enough, and we're a lot cheaper. So that's the landscape there. But if you're looking at trying to make a real difference in the marketplace, the newswire is a really great asset, and it's something that's being utilized by social media right now. For example, there are a lot of fashion influencers on Instagram, and many of them have access to PR Newswire, and they have their customized feeds. And as soon as they see a publication, or a fashion house release something with images, they take them and they share them with their audience, and people feel like they have exclusive access to the fashion house, but they got it as soon as it was publicly available. Sometimes the media will release stuff privately to people beforehand, but many times they have to do just that, just pull it from the wire. In the case of TikTok and some of the video platforms, I follow a guy called Snackalator who does a roundup each week of first fast food restaurants that are releasing new things over the next week or so, and then grocery store snack shelves that are releasing stuff, to the grocery stores. And he often says, I can't tell from the image that was provided here with the press release on the wire, but it looks like it's a glaze, but I'll be really interested to try it out when it comes and to my local area, and I'll let you know. And so he's pulling these things right from the press release. So I think it's really great that the newswire is opening up to these other influencers and recognize that we are getting our media from lots of different places. And it just makes sense. Again, there's only two places to fish. So it's very easy for social media influencers to look on these wires and pull stuff and get it as soon as it's publicly available. And so it really gives them a distinct advantage. And I think that's one of the reasons that press releases are even more valuable today, and gives them a great outlet to reach the media as well as these social media influencers, which I would say do represent a form of new media today that's very active and thriving.
Are both of your nonfiction books self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published, or did you use different publishing methods for each of your nonfiction books?
So they're both self-published. The second one, I had someone who helps people put together short books, and he took sort of a video masterclass that I had and sort of poured it into the book format for me. And yeah, that's both of what I've done. One of the things I did with the first book is I made the price $0, which I think you can do for a short period. And I announced that to all of my customers, encouraged them to go get it on Kindle. The print version I've made really cheap. It's like the lowest I could and still be able to sell it in international markets, because if you make it too low, it won't, you can't price it for international markets. And it's been, bestseller many times over. It was an Amazon bestseller in several categories. I have screenshots of that, and it continues to be a bestseller in public relations, mostly because I was able to keep the Kindle version for free. And I saw some people on a message board talking about how if you upload your book to Apple Books and you make it $0 there, which Apple allows you to do because Apple's not really a book publisher. And they're like, if you want to give it away for free, what do we care? But Amazon, is a bookseller, and they don't like, people giving it away for free on a permanent basis. So do that and then go back to Amazon and say, hey, I've made my book available for free on other platforms. You should do a price match and make it available for free. And then they replied and said, okay, we'll do it, but we reserve the right to change it back at any time. And I made it real low to begin with, like a $1.99 or something. And for many years, they've kept it $0. And so like I said, continues to stay a bestseller. People are downloading it on Kindle. I know that several universities use it in nonfiction courses and courses that talk about press releases. And so it's just been a great sort of calling card for e-releases to let people know about us, and to sort of let them know how to write a good press release and, a strategic release as well.
Now I'm going to pivot to poetry because, in addition to your work with e-releases and your nonfiction works, you're also a poet. What is your work as a poet like, and what forms of poetry do you write?
Right. So I write mostly confessional, free verse. It's usually very narrative. I do write some lyric poems, which tend to be less narrative and more, lyrical, so to find another word. But it's something that I went to college for in graduate school, and then ended up starting my business, and I picked up poetry again about 5 or 6 years ago. And for the last year and a half to 2 years, I've been really focused on it. So I've been preparing poetry, sending it out, getting published. Usually get individual poems published in poetry journals. I've been very successful there. I've had a couple of hundred poems published in poetry journals. I've also put together a couple of manuscripts. I've got one manuscript accepted to be published in February of 2026. So a little bit of wait there. That'll be published by Black Lawrence Press. And then the second manuscript, I'm still shopping around, but I'm already starting to work and compile towards my third manuscript, which will be developing in the future. For the poetry, I'm not self-publishing. I feel like there is a recognition of being published with a traditional publisher. It is very difficult, though, because there's a lot more poets and a lot more people being pushed out into the poetry world, because there's a lot of MFA programs publishing poets, and all of them have to write a manuscript for their thesis to graduate. And so there's a lot of competition there. But, despite that, it does legitimize you more, where when it comes to the business books, I had a friend who got traditionally published and said that, all of the marketing was sort of on him. And in addition, when he wanted to give the books away to clients and other people, he was paying about 60%. And, for me, My both of my books I can give away for $2 or $3 because Amazon allows you to buy these books at cost or near cost. You just pay shipping, and in addition to that, and so I've been able to really share this with all new customers and with leads and other people like that. So when it comes to at least business books, I feel that there's for my needs, self-publishing worked very well. I didn't feel the need for the legitimacy of going through a major publisher. That being said, if I was working on something that was just a little bit more open and less specific to PR or press releases, like just business overall, or something that could be appreciated by a larger audience, I certainly would consider traditional publishing, recognizing the limitations there. But I think for at least me, I was very pleased with the self-publishing route and how that worked out for me.
How does your writing of poetry help you mentally?
So I think the biggest thing that being a creative writer has helped me is with strategy. I see things differently than everybody else. And when I got started with PR, I was working for a telecom research startup in Washington, D.C., and I was miserable at it because I didn't know what the media was looking for. And we would send out releases, and unfortunately, it was through faxing at the time. And nothing would happen. And so I made it my mission to figure out what journalists were looking for. And I really realized that story arc was so important. I remember one release we sent out right before I discovered this was about Caribbean traffic to and from Caribbean countries in the U.S., international inbound and outbound traffic. And I just published the table and sent it out as a press release, and nothing happened. And then, looking at the story idea and saying, I need to reinvent this, I took that same information and I noticed that there was one country that had way more inbound and outbound traffic to the United States, more than probably several other countries combined. And when I looked into it, it's because it was sort of the center for 1-900 numbers, which were really popular in the early 1990s. And it's where you could call for 50 cents a minute and get a recorded line with your horoscopes, or for $1 or $2 a minute, you could actually call and speak to a live person. Like if you had some, problems with your pets, you could call and speak to someone who is sort of like a pet whisperer, or you could get relationship advice, all different types of uses for it. And there was even party lines where people could call a specific, major metropolitan area and speak to other singles and things like that. So it was a very interesting time. And so when I redrafted that press release, focusing on the story and talking about why that country had more inbound and outbound traffic, that got picked up. And it got picked up by The Economist, Financial Times, Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and 3 telecom trade publications. And I just felt like, wow, I wonder if this is just like, one hit and I won't be able to replicate it. I was able to replicate that again and again, focusing on the story. And that got me really excited about wanting to, share that with other small businesses, and gave me the idea for eReleases. But that being said, I don't think other people can sort of reverse engineer the way I do. And a lot of the strategic ideas that I've come up for press releases, a lot of people have, PR professionals who've done it for 20, 30 years have said, wow, I never thought about that, but you're exactly right. And for me, it just comes second nature. And I think it is because of that creative mind that I'm able to tap and feed into.
Mickie, you were an amazing guest, and I thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Mickie was a wonderful guest to interview, and I look forward to uploading a ton of podcast episodes to this podcast throughout the month of November. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.